hello, fine folks, and welcome to Booghy Plays. Today, I am not playing, I'm playing with words, with questions, and I'm having a guest. As always, my guest today is the designer of I think it's the number one game, of the number one war game on Board Game Geek. One of the designers of the number one war game on Board Game Geek. And he also did, which is War of the Ring. He also did the Battle of Five Armies and a few other games, like a game which I really like, which is Conan. It's Age of Conan. It's not Conan, it's Age of Conan. So I'm quite happy to welcome today Roberto Di Meglio, all the way from Viareggio or from Livorno. Welcome.
Hello, hello, Booghy.
um, Hello, Roberto. Welcome to Booghy Plays. I hope you're feeling good. I hope you're feeling fine.
Yes, everything is good. Thank you.
Um, So, as I have mentioned to you, this interview is going to have two parts. The first part is your story, and the second part is going to be a questionnaire. And what I like about, although I have been doing this, I think it's getting close. I started doing these interviews last summer, so I'm going towards a year now. People don't watch the interviews and they always get surprised by that questionnaire, so it's going to be fun doing that one. I hope you're feeling comfortable here in our virtual gaming room, in our virtual on our virtual gaming chairs. So I'd say let's go. We're going to go way back, and we're going to start with a question. Roberto, where are you born, and where did you grow up?
Okay. So I was born in Pisa in the now distant 1966. Yesterday was my birthday. So I just turned 57.
Ooh,
Pisa is a city in Tuscany, in Italy. It's mostly famous for the Leaning
Leaning Tower,
Tower.
yes. Everybody comes and makes his
Yeah,
picture while
yes, trying
to hold the tower, yes.
to make the Leaning Tower not to
Not
fall
fall
down.
away, yeah.
And yes, so first years in my life, I was living in Pisa. In fact, in first 8 years of my life, and then afterwards, I moved together with my family to southern Tuscany, a
Southern.
region called the Maremma, close to. So it's a more rural region, a very say a lot of hills and woods. I was living a little bit in the middle of nowhere because my father was in the army, so we lived in a military base. Hidden in the woods
In the woods of
of
Tuscany.
Tuscany.
Yeah,
And so I stayed there for a few more years. Then we moved to the main city of that area, which is called Grosseto. So it's a city in southern Tuscany. And then I moved back to the area where I still live now, essentially between Viareggio, where my office is located, and Livorno, where I live now. When I went to college, when I was 18 years old, and then more or less I always stayed in this area.
so let's not hurry up that much. So you said you grew up in Pisa for 8 years. So what were your parents' professions? Your father was in the army. What did your mother do?
My mother was a teacher, primary school teacher, and actually, in the first years of my life, she had stopped teaching because I am in a family of four brothers, all males. And so my mother was a little bit busy when we were all small kids, but then more or less when I started to grow up, she went back
Went back.
again to teaching she used to do before.
Oh, that's nice. Well, I'm a film director, and I am a fan. I would say I am of Amarcord, which is an older Italian film, and other
Yeah.
films which bring kids into the was it as as we saw it in Italian films, then a lot of kids playing a lot, running a lot, making a lot of noise. How was it to grow up in Pisa in the late 1960s, beginning of the 1970s?
Say my family of four, I must say, for kids was a little bit on the high end of the number of kids in the average family even at that time. But definitely, yes, there were many more kids than now. I remember, say, in my, say, we lived in a small apartment building, which had like nine apartments inside. And I think that every family had like two to four
Kids,
children.
I
So
see.
this means that, of course, out of a normal building at that time, you had like 20 children, and so 19 other children you could play with, go downstairs and play football together, or say play with toy cars. So it was definitely a little bit different when. My own children in our the apartment building where I live now, out of like 10 apartments in the building, they were the only children in
In
the
the
entire.
building, yeah.
So, so time has changed definitely a little bit on these
Uh,
matters.
yeah, thinking about yeah films like Malena and yeah different other films where kids there were a lot, and there are many and playing a lot. So what did you do to play back then? Did you have outside? Of course, football is a religion in Italy. Um Outside football, did you play anything else? Did you?
Yes, I did. Actually, I've been always quite bad in playing football. I like to play football. I don't like to watch football that much, but I like to play football, but I'm not good at it. No, definitely, I used to play a lot since we were kids. In those years, it was pretty normal to have some kind of board games, of course, simple kids board games. In a house, much more than in later years when video games started to become more popular. And so we had a few board games for sure, but mostly we were playing with toy soldiers. We had, so I think that maybe a little bit of the root of the passion for war games,
Yeah.
and especially with my the second of my brothers. So I have my older
Oh,
brother is 6 years older than me, and then the second brother is 3.5, 4 years essentially older than me, and so he was mostly my gaming companion when I was a kid, and we were playing a lot of toy soldiers. We were playing a lot with toy cars, but we are not just happy to play just shooting boom, boom, boom against each other, but rather we played inventing, starting to invent our own rules. So, okay, I can move one of my soldiers, then you move one of your soldiers, and then if they are close enough, we can throw little balls of papers. So we mixed, like say, playing, spontaneous playing in a way with gaming. Also say when playing with toy cars, we made our own rules to how they should race. So, okay, let's do a fast race, which is only one lap of the balcony. And then let's do a long race, which is 10 laps of the balcony. And when we shoot down the cars, we make them go down a ramp. So, we invented the rules for our games. So,
yeah. So eh, pre- were there real board games back then in Italy? Outside the games, yeah, you are making your own games in a way. But were there any, let's say, classical like Monopoly or things like that when you were a child?
Yes, yes, those kind of classical games like Monopoly, Risk, or Scarabeo, the Italian version of Scrabble, they were around. Those games based on Disney properties. I remember this game based on the Robin Hood animated movie, which had small crossbows inside that you could shoot. That was very funny. Or the game, which in Italy is called the Brivido, the one with the haunted house that you make little metallic balls run down the central towers. So we had those kind of games. But one of my favorites, which is maybe a less known game, was already a simple war game, which I played a lot against my brother, always losing. I think I never won a single game with that game, which was very interesting because it was a simple war game, but where you could uh, build up your own fleet. It was essentially an aeronaval game, we would say
Yeah,
in
yeah,
modern,
yeah, yeah,
with forces and fleets and shooting missiles. And you could decide how to put together your fleet, just like when you play Battleship. So you had like small one ships, two ships, three ships, three length, and you could put them together in different ways, deciding, okay, I want more ships but smaller and more mobile, or do I want larger ships which can carry planes? So it was, say, in its simplicity, was already reasonably advanced for its time.
I see. So you practically had the bug of a wargamer since you were a child.
Yeah.
You said that after growing up in Pisa, you went and lived in the woods somewhere in the middle of Tuscany.
Yes.
How did that were there kids, or did you play it only with your brothers?
I say there were a few other kids, but mostly for playing games, it was mostly me and my brother
Yeah.
at the time, for sure. And so, of course, being in the woods also led to more like outdoor activities. A little bit Tom Sawyer's style, we could say. So go exploring in the woods, trying to enter that mysterious cave that was. In the middle of the hillside, looking for special rocks and minerals and those kind of things. So it lent itself also to like different kind of exploration. So maybe a little bit of the bug of role playing games also
Of
came from live action exploration of mysterious places.
I see. What were your interests when you were in school? What did you enjoy when you were in school? Maybe maths, maybe sciences. Well, what?
I must say, I've always been reading a lot since when I was 5 years old, since when I learned how to read. So I've always been a very voracious reader. So that, of course, helped me through school because I say, if you are used to reading, makes your school life much easier. And already when I was a kid, I enjoyed reading about science in all kind of different topics, from astronomy, aeronautics, animals, dinosaurs. Of course, every kid loves dinosaurs. And so generally, as a school topics, I've always been good with math. I've always been good with also with literary subject, but yeah, definitely through school, my focus has been mostly on math and science subject, so that also in my higher education I kept that kind of direction. But I'm a little bit of a mixed bag in terms of my interest, because I loved philosophy as much as mathematics. I wasn't very much of a history buff. Maybe because I didn't really find maybe the teacher who really got the sparkle about history. But today I like history a lot. I like reading books about history, listening to history podcasts. So
I see.
uh, this has changed a little bit through the years.
When you so you went, where did you go to university? You
Yeah, I was to the university in Pisa.
Pisa.
As I said, I was say back and forth from Pisa in the sense that I went out of Pisa when I was a kid, but
Came back
Pisa is one of the most important universities in
in
Italy,
Italy.
and
Yes, it's
Italy
it's renowned.
especially.
Yeah.
And at the time, Pisa was also one of the only two universities in Italy who had a computer science course, so computer science faculty. And so when I was out of high school, it was 1984, and it was a very, say, special moment because the computer science was booming
Eh,
in those years. It was huge. In fact, there were so many students trying to get into computer science that the teachers become really, say, evil with the students trying
eh,
to make the test be so bad and so tough in the first year to get as many people out of the university as possible.
so um, in this period, while you were in university, did you play board games a lot? Did you
Oh,
Was the gaming life part of your student life?
no, okay, that's a good question. In fact, say my say serious gamer, let's say, life had started just a few years before, because when I was 13, 14 years old, I and my brother were looking for the world of serious games, but we didn't know where it was. There was no internet at the time,
Yeah.
so information mostly came through word of mouth. And so in the end, we ended up with a friend of my other brother, my older brother, who had quite a library of board games, which he bought in exotic places like Milan, Rome, or sometimes even abroad. So mostly they were imports, from companies like Avalon Hill, SPI, those kind of board game companies for, let's say, historical board games in those years. Marco, the name of the guy. And so Marco had this important library of games, and we started playing these kind of more serious games when I was about 14 years old. Then a couple of years afterwards, he discovered, and so we discovered too the world of role-playing games, and we started to play Dungeons and Dragons, which quite changed our habits in terms of the what we were playing, because especially for the first year or two, we switched almost completely from playing board games to playing role-playing games. Then, say we moved to a more like balanced diet of the kind of games.
Yeah.
And so this continued through high school and also continued at university. University, in fact, it was in a way it was easier because two of my roommates and other of my colleagues in the university were all interested in games. And so in the university, I think we mostly played the role-playing games. In fact, we were playing board games as well, but not as much. I remember playing a lot of a few games. For example, we played a lot of Steve Jackson's games, Illuminati,
Yeah.
the game with a card game. But mostly it was playing role-playing games and football. Football. We never stopped playing football.
I see. Yeah. The and Since then, practically, you are a gamer all your life.
Yeah, yeah.
After you have finished university, what did you start doing as a job? What did you start working in what?
Uh,
Yeah. Would-
Yeah, so my professional life in the gaming industry. So it
not
actually
necessarily in the
overlapped.
gaming. Sorry, not necessarily in the gaming industry. Did you start directly to work in the gaming industry, or you started to work in something with computers back then for the first time?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. In fact, there was a little bit of an overlapping between my, say, professional life in the gaming industry and my university studies, because already when I was, let's say, halfway through the university, more or less, I started to have like semi-professional interest in gaming. So I was organizing small conventions. And tournaments. I was writing and printing my own fanzine. This was in '87, so I was still halfway through university. And so this developed over the years up to essentially my graduation in 1990. And uh, after that, I started doing a PhD in computer science. So I stayed in the university continuing to do a PhD while continuing also professional interest in games. So it was developing. So for the first 5 or 6 years, essentially my say early professional life in the gaming industry was went parallel to my studies when I was completing university and completing the PhD. And then essentially when finishing the PhD, I decided to switch because I had two careers in front of me, and both very tough in the sense that if you want to stay in the university and become a university professor or a researcher, it's 110% of your time needs to be devoted to that. Or you want to set up your own company, as I was starting to do in those years, it's 110% of your time. And so I had to decide what I really wanted to do, and I decided essentially to go for a career in the gaming
Industry.
industry.
So you immediately started the company. You started RS back then in
Um,
1990.
No, not immediately, in the sense that actually the first years of my professional life, it was 1991, so soon after I graduated and when I was about to enter the PhD. My first, say, professional job in the industry was editing a magazine, Chaos, called, like with a Kaos.
I see.
And this was essentially the first mass diffusion role-playing game and fantasy science fiction magazine in Italy. And I was editing this magazine for a publisher in Bologna, which was mostly a comic book publisher called the Granata Press. And they were interested into entering the game publishing through this magazine and also various gaming products. Then a couple years afterwards, they were at the point where they didn't want to diversify their business as the year before, so they decided that they wanted to close down essentially the magazine. But we discussed it with them because the magazine was okay, was a distraction from their core business, but it was quite doing quite well and was profitable. So we agreed in establishing a subsidiary company to run the magazine and to run the gaming lines that at the moment we were working on. So in 1993, this company was born, which was called the Nexus,
Yeah.
like, Blade Runner androids.
Yeah.
And, Nexus, to cover the magazine, to cover the gaming products that we were preparing together with Granata Press, and that has been my first company. And Nexus essentially ran through from 1993 to 2011, essentially. So that was before Ares.
Before Ares. Um, so when did you discover modern board games, which we call today modern board games? Did you play any of these games, or modern? Let's call
Uh,
it Euros or.
It's for me, it's a little bit difficult to find a discovery moment in the proper sense, in
Yeah,
the
yeah,
sense
yeah.
that, say, essentially, it was more like an evolution of playing different kind of games from more serious, from less serious to more serious, and then
What?
heavier games.
Sorry.
So it was quite a transition. I was. I can't say I was very much a lover of Euro games in most of my life. Uh, in the sense that mostly I've been playing very, say, strongly thematic games, high interaction games, like card games and role-playing games. So it was more in this kind of field. It's for example, at some point, I remember with one of my gaming pals, we tried Settlers of
Catan.
Catan, but was definitely unimpressed, from leading armies to leading ships and goods didn't sound so exciting to us. But then over the years, let's say the taste developed a little bit also for the kind of like simpler, lighter games. Now I play a little bit of everything, so depending on the type of company I play with.
I see. So you are a heavier gamer, let's say, because all these types of war games which really are heavier gamers games, they take a long time to play. War games usually can be rather heavy. Do you play other types of games these days, or you keep on playing outside the games you usually play test your own games, of course,
I
outside
must
of.
say that in these days I have a much wider variety of things that we play. The games that I played when I was younger, let's say, it's they also were quite varied in terms of complexity and length. If I remember the games which we played a lot, I remember games like, say, Steve Jackson Car Wars, for example, or Games Workshop Space Hulk, or I don't know, but the Dune, the original Dune,
Dune. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Ralph
yeah.
Brothers. So we played a lot also, let's say, of lighter games or games which in those days were considered to be light, like Car Wars, and as well as the more complex war games like Third Reich or Squad Leader or Wooden
Yeah.
Ships and Iron Man or the War of the Ring, Richard Berg's and Howard Barras SPI's War of the Ring. So we were playing the heavier games, but also some of the lighter games. And then when Magic came out in the 90s, of course, I was playing Magic. I was playing some predecessors to Magic, like Wiz War. So it was playing a lot of different stuff. In these days, I still play, these types of games, but especially because here at say we receive a lot of proposals of different games, and so we play test and try different games. We look at the games which are more popular in the market and play those games to understand better
Why?
why they are popular.
Yeah.
So, I can say last week I finally played Wingspan, which I didn't play yet. So we're playing, I don't know, in the last few months, Azul, Splendor, and I don't know how many others. So we played a little bit of everything to have a better understanding of the gaming scene in these days. I must say that generally speaking, if a game is good, I like to play it. So with Wingspan, I was complaining because some cards were really broken in terms of too powerful, and so my friend who was playing with me got one of these super powerful card in turn one, and say he steamrolled above
The
us,
game.
but
Yeah.
I see why people can like it.
Why
It's a,
people
it's
don't
a good.
like it? Yeah, yeah. Um, so practically, your gaming. You are a gamer all your life, the way you're describing it. You have been playing games and started also a company. which yeah went into the gaming industry, Nexus transformed itself into Ares, right?
Sort of, in the sense that, of course, it's a continuation of my professional life. In terms of corporate entities, they are two different entities. Also, because, say, with Nexus, we learned some important lessons on what we really wanted to do and how to do those kind of things well. So the main transition is that Nexus was, as I told you, was born as a magazine publisher, then a role-playing game publisher. Then it evolved, let's say, it developed into being mostly focused on the Italian market, and then translating, importing products from the rest of the world, especially from the English-speaking world, into Italian and into the Italian market. Say with role-playing games initially, like I don't know, Warhammer Fantasy Role-Playing and others. But afterwards, especially we established a very strong partnership with Fantasy Flight Games. So we are translating into the Italian market everything from Fantasy Flight Games and afterwards games from several other publishers as well. Then at some point in the development of the company, we also started to design and publish our own games. And we after the first experiments, some of these games were very successful on the international market, especially War of the
Oh,
Ring
really? Yeah.
was published in 2004. And in the same year, we also published a game called Wings of War, which is the same system which is now used for our RS Wings of Glory game. And so with the combination of War of the Ring and Wings of War, we started to break into the international market. But we did this without changing the focus of the company. So we kept doing mostly games for the Italian market, and then we had these
These
kind of
yeah these games which are your own creations. Now the question for me, as it looks, becoming a publisher, it was a continuous road, which it seems seamless. um, how did you think, I also want to design games? When did you start doing this, uh, playing with the idea and finally doing it?
Uh, in fact, this also has been sort of a development of my, say, personal attitude to dealing with the gaming world, in the sense that, of course, through role-playing games, it was very natural for me since when I started playing role-playing games, also to produce content for role-playing games, like every game master does, of course. So writing my own adventures, writing my own campaign settings, at some point starting to think about, okay, I will change the rules in this way, in that way. At the time, but say mostly, of course, the focus was on writing role-playing content, and I was also trying to think of making some of this content, say, published, professionally published, but in the early years, I never really tried to do that. Then, of course, with running the magazine, we had to select, but also to create content for the magazine. And so that content started to be adventures, but sometimes also games. And the first games that I wrote and published actually were games which I created to be published inside the magazine. So I published, for example, a set of universal miniature wargaming rules. I published another game for another magazine that we were publishing about chariot racing. So actually, the first games that I started to design were games which were aimed to be published inside our magazines. And so essentially, through most of my life, I've been doing two jobs, publisher mostly and designer a little bit. So that it has been most of my focus through the years has been on the development and publishing part rather than the design part in the proper sense.
I see. War of the Ring is a collaboration. There are, I think, three or four designers
Yeah,
on it.
three. Yeah, for me, Francesco Repitello and Marco Maggi.
See, do you like working with other people? Do you like the because sometimes too many heads might lead to some conflict.
Uh,
You managed
I
to.
must say, yeah. No, overall, I do, I can say, because, say, first, it helps me to be more productive. That's also, say, it's been more or less my character since I was in school. I was used to study together with other people. For example, I was more effective when working with other people. I would procrastinate less. I would be less. I would fight my laziness a little bit better in with companions. And so, yes, I quite like working with other people. I think the only game which I really worked in as a designer and which is a game that I worked on alone is Rattlesnake, which is a very simple family game using magnets, very strong
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
uh,
yeah. I think I know it.
magnets called Rattlesnakes, and which was also selected the year it was published in the recommended list of the children German game of the year. And but that's because I took like 15 minutes to invent the game, so there was no time to do it together with somebody else. But yes, most of the other games I've been working together with other people, and I quite like the brainstorming, the interaction, and work, and especially of course with Francesco and Marco. I've been collaborating for many years, and so. We have been, even if we live in distant cities, they live in Venice, and I have always been in Tuscany. But say we always find ways to, okay, visit each other a little bit or exchange ideas from a distance. So,
Yeah. So I do have this question for most of the designers. Before you have your first published design, did you shelve any design? Did you?
yes, I do, but say most of the designs which I put on the shelf were really unfinished, in the sense that most of the time, if it's a project which I don't see it goes anywhere, I just stop it where it is, even if it's unfinished. So I have a few unfinished ideas. I think there is only one game which actually is later than War of the Ring, though, which was a hidden role game about vampires, which I think the starting idea was good, but then it didn't develop so well, and then so I put it aside. But as I say, I'm not as too productive as a designer. So well, I tried to finish most of the things that I design, and most of them are published. There's very few ideas left in the drawer.
I see. You put on the designer, the developer, and also the publisher hat. Which one you like the most? Which one
Ah,
fits the better? The best. Sorry, not the best. The best on your head.
yeah. It's interesting. I would say that, of course, if I had a chance to really design games most of the time, I think I would love to do that. But in theory, as I never really did that, I don't know, maybe after a few months doing that, I would be bored. The reality is that actually I love to switch between doing different things. And so the fact that, okay, I say, even in these days, I'm working as a designer on the next War of the Ring expansion, then I'm looking at the game from another designer and say, working with him, exchanging ideas and how to improve the game. Actually, on several games that we have in the pipeline, I'm in this position to discuss with designers and help them to improve the game a little bit. At the same time, okay, between all these creative stuff, which can be sometimes it's a little bit brain burning, you can't do this. I cannot do this 12 hours a day. And so Okay, for relaxing, I prepare some spreadsheet with the specification of another game to send on to the printer, or I create a post on our social media. So it's in fact I like overall to switch between these different sets. I think that
Tasks.
makes
Yeah.
my work always different and interesting.
Do you find it easy to switch these hats, to go from the designer hat to developer hat, then go to, especially from the designer hat to developer hat, and especially when you have to do it for your own games?
I think yes, in the sense that it's not, the mindset is mostly the same when you are in a way when you are designing. Of course, you have more freedom, and when I'm developing, of course, I tend to be quite protective of the ideas of the original designer. Maybe because I put myself in their position. So when I develop games, I don't try to redo them or redesign them. So I try to be understanding of what they were trying to do and how to improve things without, say, redesigning the
The
games.
games, yeah.
So, but in a lot of ways, it's similar in the sense that when you're working on your own design and refining and playtesting your own design, it's most of the time is very much a similar process. It's time to improve things, to make rules better, to remove mechanics which are unnecessary. So a lot of the time is the same. Of course, in the design part, there is that initial creative sparkle, which is important, which is doesn't come all the time, of course. So sometimes you have to chase it a little bit. But after that sparkle, let's say, which gives you the starting point, at least for me, is like that. It's mostly going over and over and over and improving things at every iteration of the process. And so that's very much what I try to do also with the games that we develop.
The develop. Uh, Developing, I'm thinking of a game like Battle of Five Armies, or even Age of Conan or War of the Ring. They are pretty longer games with heavier rule set, and these games take a lot of time to develop. How much do you play test? How many play tests do you do until you say we are ready to release it?
It's say it depends on the game because sometimes you do a few playtests and you see things which click in place. But say normally it's say if you think of all these games that you mentioned, we are talking about process which takes from 1 year, 2 years time sometimes. So it's of course it's not that playtesting all the time and doing just that single game
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
over a period of time, but is as especially as working with a team. Sometimes okay, I test these ideas, then I send to my colleagues. Then when the ideas are back, they provide some feedback, and then we create a new prototype and move on. So, but this process, I remember, say for War of the Ring, which was comparatively speaking, quite fast in terms of development process, considering what, say, the complexity and the depth of the game. But it was about 1 year of development time. And I think of, say, Age of Conan and Battle of Five Armies. Battle of Five Armies is a little bit different because it's a development of a system which we had designed originally for
For
a
War of
expansion for War of the Ring,
War of the
yeah,
Ring, yeah.
Battles of the Age. So of course there was a lot of time which went into designing the original system and much less for Battle of Five Armies itself. But yeah, normally it takes many months, 1 year, 2 years to get through. So from the first draft of the manuscript to the final version. And of course, especially now that it's easier to communicate from a distance, we do also a lot of outside playtesting, especially for the War of the Ring expansion. So War of the Ring is a very difficult game to expand because it has a very delicate, very fragile balance, and it's a game which receives a lot of love from the
Yeah.
fans. So we don't want to ruin it with expansions. And so the expansions for War of the Ring are play tested through at least, depending on the moment, like 20, 30 people playing, and which I communicate with them. There are hundreds of playtests done, many more than I could do alone through the help of several all the time friends who have been playing the game for a long time and have a good understanding of it.
Um, you um, there is a balance of streamline to streamlining a game to making it I don't know, maybe too streamlined. How do you find that balance to cut enough but not cut too much to make it too maybe without too much meat or maybe too thin?
Yeah. I don't know if I really managed to do that to find the right balance. But what definitely I think that it's a good rule of design that there should be no unnecessary element in the game. So that's of course every game, also every design object should be as simple as possible for its function. Then the point I think is more what the function is. So what is that you want to achieve in the game. And so sometimes this means that there are some elements in the game which add complexity. But so the evaluation there is okay. Is this necessary for the purpose that I want to achieve? So practical example from the development of War of the Ring. In the early days of War of the Ring, when the Fellowship is discovered by the Shadow player, and so you have to move the Fellowship and decide where the Fellowship is. You could move through shadow strongholds without that specific location that you were moving through had any specific meaning. So you were moving through Moria, through the mines of Moria, but the mines of Moria were the same as any other region in terms of the game as an effect. Then, of course, we realized that this felt wrong. It was going against the thematic representation of the story that you want to achieve, which was, in the case of War of the Ring, a realistic representation of what happens in the novels, so that the things that happen in the novel can happen again. Of course, different things must also happen.
Yeah,
And so we decided, okay, we need to add a special rule to deal with the fact that when you move through a shadow stronghold, it's more dangerous than when you move through another kind of place. So, okay, it's one more rule. It adds complexity, but if you want to create that feeling of, wow, now I have to go through the mines of Moria and I'm I'm in danger, then you need to have that rule to recreate that feeling. So I think the important thing is to understand what you want to achieve, how much of the theme you want to represent in the game. For me, of course, as you can imagine from my personal history, the thematic aspect of the game is very,
very
very
important.
important.
Yeah,
And so when we approach a game with a theme like War of the Ring or Age of Conan or Marvel Heroes or The Hobbit, of course, it's important that the game really makes the theme come through properly. When I'm not constrained by the theme, then I can do something so simple as Rattlesnake, which has rules which I can explain in 30 seconds, which I can explain can be played in 10 minutes. That's great, of course, but that because that game has no constraints in terms of the theme. It only wanted to create a fun emotion, a fun sensation, and so I can do that with the minimum amount of rules and the minimum amount of complexity.
basically, yeah. Can you talk us a bit through your design philosophy? Do you have a design philosophy?
Hmm. Design philosophy. Well, partly I think I described it right
Yeah,
now.
yeah, a little
Since
bit. You did, yeah. That's
yeah,
I thought
yes,
it was a good segue to finish it.
yes, but yes. So I think that in the end, for me, the important thing is that the design of the games must create the right kind of emotions, which most of the time for me this means that it must create interesting interactions between players, interesting decision making. So it's important that every decision in the game is felt by the player as a struggle. And I think that it's also important. One thing that I like the most, which is I think present in all of my games, I like to have a level of randomness in the games. And I really like that the player plays well when he or she is able to dominate the randomness in the game. So I think that's very much what life is about. You know, in life, all kind of random things happen to you, and you have to go through them and to make your best to go through them. And I like to have that kind of feeling in a game. So random things sometimes happen, but if you are good at playing the game, you are able to manage and dominate those random things and get through the difficulties. So
S-
what I try to achieve.
But that means that the design itself allows you to dominate randomness as a player.
Yes, of course, if it doesn't, of course, it wouldn't be interesting as a game, you know. Of course,
Yeah.
in life, you often are not in a position to dominate the random things. The good thing with games is that you can create an ideal world where if you are good at doing things, you do you do. So it's
So, could I ask you, what is fun to you?
what is fun. I think fun. That's tough. Fun. I think that fun is the interaction with other people. I think that the really funny moment in gaming, as well as probably the really funny moment in life, happens when there is something interesting which goes on between people. And so that, of course, is a very important element in gaming. Not always. There are games which are, say, tend to put you too much in a solitaire mode, which I don't think that's good. So I think that the real fun part, people are fun. So
People are
it's,
fun, yeah.
interacting with people is fun.
Um, it came to me a saying, which I can't say right now, from a comedian. I won't say it though. And now because you have in publishing, can you let's talk a bit, not too long, but let's talk a bit about what do you think about Kickstarter versus classical distribution? Uh, which one are you a fan of?
Both personally as a customer, as a person who buys game, I've been doing both. Sometimes kickstarting project, sometimes buying games off the shelf of a shop.
Sorry, I'm interrupted you. Crowdfunding, not necessarily Kickstarter. It could be Game
Yeah,
Founded.
crowdfunding these days,
Yeah,
of course, found and
yeah, yeah.
uh, systems as well. So it's so personally, I find both approaches have their own merits, both as a customer and as a publisher. In fact, as a publisher with Ares, we've been one of the first companies to use the Kickstarter already 10 years ago, 11 years ago. We launched the Sales of Glory, our naval miniature game on Kickstarter. At the time, when with the kind of funding that we got with Sales of Glory, we were like number 25 in the most crowdfunded game list. So it was say pretty good result for the time. Now it's probably 1,000 or I don't know, maybe less. Um, and I think we are the first Italian company in all kind of business to use crowdfunding, to use Kickstarter. And so in fact that it was very funny that in the early days we got companies which were doing like movie distribution, companies which were doing coffee machines, companies which are doing all kind of things coming to us asking some help, some tips on how to handle crowdfunding. So we were really early in crowdfunding, but we never relied completely on crowdfunding for our company. So we decided that we wanted to crowdfund the projects that really needed it, in the sense that they were more expensive to develop, more risky to develop. And so crowdfunding, of course, is very important because it gives you funding ahead of time and because it gives you a good expectation of what the market wants and how much the game will be in demand. So the success that you get in your crowdfunding launch, of course, gives you an idea of what will happen when you hit the shelves. But we never relied on Kickstarter only, on crowdfunding only. And in fact, even today, say our most important recent release, which is War of the Ring, the card game, went direct
Directly
into
to
traditional
distribution.
distribution
Yeah.
without crowdfunding.
Yeah. So we move a bit forward. Could you tell me? Could you tell us a bit how a day in your life looks like?
Mhm. First, my main job in life is driving, like driving a cab, because most of the first hour in my day is like driving people around, my kid, my grandnephew, my wife. So it depends, but say most of of the first hour is devoted to driving people around, and then the second hour is devoted to driving myself to work because I live quite distant from where I work. And then typically in the morning is mostly going through email, and email, of course, in my multiple roles means a lot of different things like answering to a supplier, answering to a player asking some information, answering to a designer who wants feedback on the playtest that we are doing of his games. So going through emails essentially means going through all the different jobs that I do. And mostly in the typically after the lunch break, we almost always play something for like 1 hour or 2 hours, depending on what we are doing at that moment. So it can be playtesting a game that we have in development, or just say, as I was saying before, getting some game that we think that we need to know better and play that game, or playtesting a proposal that we received, or playtesting a published games that was proposed to us for publishing or distribution on the English language market. And so 1 or 2 hours in the afternoon are almost always devoted to playing something. And then after that, it varies a lot depending on what the priorities are. Sometimes can be, say, like for example, in these days, a lot of the time has been spent on the playtesting and development of the next War of the Ring expansion. So that, for example, time can go to that, or time can go to writing feedback to designers. So the rest of the afternoon is typically mostly on the development part, in providing feedback or writing new rules or developing the next iteration of a game. So it's more or less it's like this.
You see, and then you go home, and
And yes,
drive everybody back home.
Yeah, no, no, normally, most of the time in the evening, I just have to drive myself and another colleague of mine, which lives in Livorno with me. So we drive together to Livorno, and then sometimes, yes, I have my younger daughter does judo, for example, so getting them from the judo dojo and those kind of things. But mostly in the evening, I don't have to drive as much as in the morning.
I see. And with all that driving, well, you still have time to do developing. Um, and
Sometimes, when you drive, you can think stuff.
so I have one more question, which is what is two more questions in this? What is your most played game?
Most played games through, say, my entire gaming life, probably Dungeons and Dragons in various forms, in
I
the
see.
sense that I definitely spent more hours playing Dungeons and Dragons than any other game. Then I don't know if I look at my university years and high school years, and looking, say, at games which are not role-playing games. I think we played hundreds of hours of Car Wars and Illuminati, the Steve Jackson games.
Yeah,
Uh, in these days, we play so many different games. I think it's not just my problem. I think it's everybody's problem that we play so many different games that it's hard to say, okay, this one game I play a lot because I
yeah.
switched a lot between different games.
And do you have a favorite game outside D&D? Apparently,
Outside D&D and outside the War of the Ring, which I can,
well,
I think even if I were not the designer, say, I designed War of the Ring together with Francesco and Marco the way it is because it is the game that I wanted to
to
play
play.
as a game and as a fun for Lord of the Rings. So it ranks pretty high in the rankings of my favorite games. I say that outside of these games that I really like a lot, Citadels, Space Hulk, for sure. Um,
I
I quite like playing Carcassonne, even if it doesn't fit with almost nothing of what I've been saying until now. But I really like Carcassonne, and I teach a little bit of board game design in a school in Florence. And it's always the first game that I ask my students if they know Carcassonne. If they don't, I get them to play immediately.
I see. And do you have a favorite designer out of the? Do you like someone in special?
Favorite designer, I think a designer which I like a lot overall is Bruno Faidutti, because Bruno, I think, is a great combination of games which have beautiful themes, beautiful interactions, and beautiful mechanics. So I think that Bruno's design strike a very good balance between
I
those
see.
three.
And my last question is, uh, it's a question for you. Would you want to add something else that I might not have asked you?
Um, Okay. Oh, you asked a lot of things on various levels. So, so maybe okay, something that we didn't talk about, but I like thinking about is the way the traditional physical board gaming is dealing with the developments in the digital world, and so the direction of hybrid games, digital games, and how hybrid games say can be relevant or not in the future in the board game industry. So I think there's been a lot in the recent years of trying to include apps inside board games
Yeah,
and trying to move board games to intelligent tabletops. I think it's an interesting direction. I think that probably something real interesting will happen in the future, some kind of breakthrough like we had, I don't know, with collectible card games, something which becomes really relevant. At the moment, it seems to me that most of the time it's just technology for the sake of technology. So technology is most often used just as a gadget, just for its own sake, because okay, there are people who are attracted by the new things, by experimenting with the hybrid games, experimenting with digital elements inside the board games. But I don't see yet anything which says, okay, this is really something which is incredibly interesting, and something like this could never have been achieved without creating a hybrid games or creating a game with electronic or digital components. But I'm sure in the future there will be something interesting in that direction. I don't know exactly what.
I see. And we end with my questionnaire, which I have talked to you in the beginning. And
Okay.
sorry, sorry.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, okay, okay. So, my first question is, what is your favorite word?
Oh, amicizia, friendship.
Friendship. This question, I forgot to say to you. This question comes from Proust. It's derived from Proust questionnaire, which
Okay.
has two different questionnaires, and it was made. It came to life through Bernard Pivot, a French host. So let's go to the next question. What is your least favorite word?
Um, it's a bad word, so I wouldn't say that.
You are allowed to say it.
Oh, cagare in italiano.
Cagar. I see.
The shit.
uh, what turns you on creatively, emotionally, spiritually?
Hmm. I think intelligence overall. I think I really like when I find, say, in people or in ideas, when I find something which I think is the intelligence really what turns me on.
Sparks.
So,
What turns you off?
so stupidity, definitely.
I was quite expecting that one.
That
And this is quite interesting. What is your favorite curse word?
I think, cazzo.
Of course it
Just
is.
like more or less, there is no exact fuck in
In
English, but
English,
it's
yeah,
not
something like
really
that, yeah.
exactly the same.
What sound or noise do you love?
What type of noise?
Or sound or noise do you love?
I love the sound of the sea waves,
The sea waves.
the
And
waves of the sea.
yeah, and what sound or noise do you hate?
Uh, everything is screeching.
Everything screeching. Yeah. Which profession outside the one you already do would you like to attempt?
To attempt or say realistically, I would
Not
say.
realistically. Not
Not
realistically. That's the
realistically.
idea.
That's
Ideally,
the astronaut. That is it. That's what I really wanted. Always wanted to be an astronaut,
I see.
going to the stars.
And what profession you would not like to attempt?
What I would not like to attempt. I don't know if there is a specific one, because I think that say if you do things well, you can find enjoyment from most of the things that you do. Say like I like cleaning dishes in the kitchen because, for example, when cleaning dishes, I like that in 15 minutes I see a visible result of what I do. So I think that if you do it well, you can do almost everything. But yeah, if I have to say something, everything which doesn't involve creativity at all. So something which is like just a repetitive paperwork stuff, going through bureaucratic stuff, filling forms, those kind of things. I don't like filling forms. I don't like bureaucracy. I don't like those things.
And a question for a Catholic: if heaven exists, what do you expect God to say to you when you arrive at the pearly gates?
That's that's tough. I'm not so sure it exists. I've been grown up, of course, as all Italians are, as a Catholic, but I'm not too convinced. So what probably he would say, you see, you were wrong. I'm here.
And sir, those are the most of my those are my questions. Now, in the end, there I have a question for you from the audience. Will this be the last expansion for War of the Ring, the
Uh,
Kings of Middle
okay,
Earth?
so I must say that when we released the War of the Ring second edition, we always wanted to have three expansions. That
I
was
see.
the idea. That would be nice to have a trilogy of expansion to go with the trilogy concept of the novels and so on. So we set forward with the idea to do three expansion exactly. Now, of course, we have a few more ideas which we picked up along the way. So I don't know. There might be more, but let's finish this one first, which has been delayed for so long, and then we'll think about it.
Okay. Thank you a lot, Roberto, for doing this. Grazie mille.
Grazie, Booghy. Thank you very much.
I hope I kindly ask you not to close the connection. I will close the and we'll speak a bit afterwards.
Okay.
Just for,
Okay.
thank you a lot for doing this.
Thanks a lot. Thank you, everybody.
Um, as always, I want to thank everyone who came and watched live. I want to thank everyone who will come and watch after the fact. If you like what you see, like, share, and subscribe because it keeps the internet alive. Hit the notification bell. Thank you, Benz, for being here. So, like, share, subscribe because we are on a quest. We want to go to 1,000 subscribers. And I thank again Roberto for taking the time to do these and answer my questions. Until next time, all I have to say is what it says there. Play a lot, play loads, have fun, and bye bye, fine folks, wherever in the world you are.